Now, in terms of the external audit, well, one of the requirements is for them to be in a position to appoint, but also to remove the external audit firm. The audit committee will recommend an external audit firm, but also recommend potential removal of the external audit firm. They are not there to appoint or remove, they are there to recommend appointment or removal to the shareholders. It is the shareholders, perhaps at an annual general meeting, who ultimately will decide whether a specific audit firm should be appointed or indeed removed. How effective that audit firm should be being managed by the audit committee in terms of whether they are coming up with proper management letter points, so internal control weaknesses with practical recommendations. What sort of quality are those recommendations? Whether the auditors are independent, whether the fee income is appropriate for the audit firm. Anytime an auditor resigns, there should be some sort of investigation. A resignation might be because the term of office has expired, or it might be some sort of disagreement between the external auditor and management. So the reasons are vital, because if there is disagreement, then there is potential area to investigate. Auditor fees are approved by the audit committee. If the external auditors have concerns, and maybe they do not want to raise those concerns with the executive directors, then the audit committee could provide a good mechanism for those concerns to be raised. And I mentioned earlier about fees in terms of independence. It's important for the audit committee to oversee and approve other services provided by the external auditor. So as well as the external audit, what other services does our external auditor also provide? Maybe services on tax or internal audit or a VAT or due diligence reviews. All of these other services are looked at and they need to be regulated. Now, in terms of these non-audit services, it's important to understand what sort of oversight and approval actually works. Ultimately, it comes from the audit committee. We need to ensure that the external auditor's independence remains, and therefore the more non-audit services, the more fee income that the external auditors are receiving, there is the potential the less independent they are, because they are dependent upon fee income from your organisation. There are requirements in terms of ethical standards, but also prohibitions by law in relation to specific non-audit services. And we will cover this a little bit later on in this course. Anything that affects independence or objectivities must be considered. That is not to say all non-audit services cannot take place, because if there is a safeguard in place which will mitigate that risk, then it is likely that is absolutely fine. So the nature of audit services, non-audit services, is absolutely vital, but also, does the audit firm have sufficient resources, have sufficient skills and experience? Are they the right party to produce that piece of work? What sort of fees are being generated? And therefore, what are the total fees being generated for this external audit firm? Do they really depend upon this firm in terms of fees? Is there over-reliance? Well, there are rules about that. Now, not every organisation will have an audit committee, but there are certain advantages of having one. Having an audit committee is basically, an audit committee is an organisation, or rather a group headed by non-executive directors, independent non-executive directors. And therefore, that scrutiny, that level of scrutiny, the voice of the shareholder, will provide additional credibility. It is a good control mechanism. by having independent non-executive directors, you need to make sure that the experience of those non-executive directors are appropriate for the organisation. And it might be those non-executive directors have come from other similar types of businesses in a previous life, and therefore they have a lot of experience and knowledge that they can bring to the table. So having an audit committee, if it's effective, does enhance the control environment, does enhance internal controls. Having an audit committee doesn't necessarily mean you have a good control environment. It's ultimately what the audit committee actually does and the results of that piece of work that would confirm whether the control environment is strengthened or not. It is vital, as a reminder, that at least one member of the audit committee has financial expertise in order that they can help the other non-executive directors to review the financial statements to make sure they are appropriate and the accounting policies are appropriate for that organisation. If we have additional credibility, if we have enhanced control, then a finance provider will likely have more confidence in being able to understand or at least rely upon the information being produced and helping them to grow by providing finance. Now I want to finish with a potential scenario. So we've got here a company which is just listed, or we could say a company which is about to list or planning to. And the board has contacted the audit firm and asked for some advice in relation to the corporate governance arrangements. Because remember, if an organisation is going to be listed, then the ownership of that business changes, and therefore the accountability of the directors potentially changes as well. The requirement here is draft a briefing note for the audit partner, commenting on the weaknesses in the company's corporate governance arrangements, explaining why. So it's application of your knowledge of corporate governance to a scenario. That's what this question is looking at. So clearly you would need to use the information in the scenario and be able to apply your knowledge of corporate governance to determine whether something is good or is bad and requires additional improvement. That's the point. Application of your knowledge against the scenario. The key weaknesses must be identified and key recommendations must be presented. This will help you answer this question and earn the professional marks.